You're listening to the Kilcullen Diary podcasts, stories in sound from a village grown bigger. Hello, I'm Brian Byrne. You're listening to a short series of podcasts commissioned for the Climate Action Weekend organised by the Kildare Public Participation Network. In this episode, I'm looking at giving old electric cars an extra charge. Early adopters of technology will shell out good money, sometimes a lot of it, just because they're seriously interested in being ahead of the general curve. But as the technology improves, and it generally does so quickly in the early days, their expensive tech can get left behind. This has happened with electric cars. Less than a decade after the real electric car era started with the first Nissan Leaf, the key range issue has changed the electric vehicle scene utterly. In 2020, there are many more electric car models available from all the main car brands. Where they all differ most significantly from the early cars is in the real-world range. Typically, nowadays, that's in the high 300 kilometres area and up beyond 500 kilometres for more expensive versions. That has effectively dealt with the main barrier to widespread adoption of electric vehicles. Leaving home every morning with in excess of 300 kilometres in the tank is very well beyond the distance the vast majority of owners will travel in any given day. But where does that leave owners of early electric cars? Thousands of which remain in daily use in Ireland, but which may only have a real range of maybe 80 to 120 kilometres, depending on age. People like Barry McMahon in County Kildare, a long-time user of an electric car and a background in engineering and electronics.
We actually bought our first electric car in 2016, and that was a second-hand Nissan Leaf. And it was kind of interesting because I still was riding around on scooters at the time at a short enough range. But she really got into it and loved it and enjoyed driving around in it. So that was the first experience with a car and driving a car. I think for me, having some interest in the electric vehicles before probably was a plus getting into that space, and I was less afraid of it. But that's quite recent, yeah.
With fellow electric motorbike enthusiast and Leaf owner Eamon, Barry tried to find some way of upgrading his own Leaf. It wasn't just that they wanted more range.
We're also very motivated about the social aspect to this, the idea of cars. I mean, if you think about those early Nissan Leafs, those cars, if you've ever been in one, Brian, they're very well built. They're finished to a very high standard. The only thing that's wrong with them, and even the electronics and everything in them now is very good. It's quite, if you think of it in social context, it's quite criminal that Nissan don't make it reasonable to be able to change the batteries in them. It's about 9,000 or 10,000 euros to change the batteries in them, and they don't make it easy, and they haven't really directly allowed third parties to do that.
But nature and enthusiasts both abhor a vacuum, and this one is being filled around the world by a growing army of third-party operators. Eamon takes up the story.
So we started off and found a cooperative in the Netherlands called McMahon, who had solved that problem and designed a kit to upgrade a Nissan Leaf from its original design, which would give about 100 kilometre range to 220 or 240 kilometres. Their solution is really good. It's technically very good, and it's very light touch on the car. So it's not a big change. It's a small change that could be reversed very easily, but it over doubles the range of the car. So it takes something from being, very limited, very town car to being an Irish car.
The pair transported Eamon's car to McMahon in September last and were trained there in how to make the conversion. They're now officially certified to do such conversions on Nissan Leafs and Nissan ENV200 vans, and they've set up a company, Range Therapy, to do this. They've converted Barry's own 2011 car, bringing the useful range from 87 kilometres to 217 kilometres. So what's involved? Eamon again.
There are two options for upgrading the range of the car. One is to change the main battery or to add an extension battery. So if your main battery is reasonably okay, then it seems best to leave that as it is and put an extension battery in the boot. and then and you have to put that into a fireproof box, and everything has to be bolted to the chassis of the car. And then from the point of view of using the car, it behaves exactly as if it has a big battery. It doesn't know there are two batteries. It just sees it as one big battery. It takes longer to charge and travels twice as far. People might know there are different Nissan Leafs, different generations of them. So just in the first generation, the first 2 years, the battery pack does take up more boot space than I think most people would like. And that's our cars.
In practical terms, there's more than just being able to go further because you have a new extra battery. There are positives for the life of the original battery too. Barry McMahon.
Our car, when we bought the car with 40,000 kilometres, it was doing 130 kilometres. It was now down to 80, which is not a lot. So we have that back up now at just over 200 kilometres. So that's a huge plus. But it seems the car is very good at managing the charging and discharging. And we also know that this new battery protects the old battery, so it adds life to that old battery as well. Because that's been drawn on, there's less power being drawn off and on it, and it's charging and discharging at slower rates. So they're all pluses, if you like, to that.
It's not a cheap matter. The conversion costs €7,500, mainly because the cost of lithium batteries is still high. But there are other advantages down the line. Eamon Stack.
What we do say to people is that if you put a battery into the car, that battery will outlast the car by a long time. Like the batteries in our car should last at least 25 years. So maybe after 10 years in the car, they would be a perfect candidate for a power wall in your house, so that you could take the solar energy from your roof and store it in the battery pack. And a very good example of that is Barry here has done that with an old battery out of an old Leaf car.
It's all very well setting up an enterprise because you're enthusiastic and almost missionary about electric cars and extending their range and life. But enterprise needs a market in order to survive. What's the market for this work? Eamon Stack.
There's 6,000 of these cars in Ireland that are Nissan Leafs that really do need a battery extension to make them usable. And then with our partners, McMahon in the Netherlands, we're working on 5 other cars and vans. So the other very popular car is the Renault Zoe, and some of those cars need a lift. And then there's Citroens and Peugeots.
So, dealing with the issue of range anxiety and old electric cars can be solved. But Barry and Eamon have a wider mission in focus. Eamon again.
The concern around range is one of the major blocks to people adopting cars. And so a major part of our initiative then isn't just the technical thing of converting cars, but to generate a conversation with ordinary people who are thinking about electric cars and saying, look at it, range shouldn't be a worry to you. You can have as much range as you want. You know, what we're doing then within that is to say, the 2 sources of carbon in cars are the daily travel, where if we're burning hydrocarbons, we're putting a lot of carbon dioxide, but also the manufacture of the car. So it's about the range of the journey and the range of the lifetime of the car.
Range Therapy is a not-for-profit company which is operated as a social enterprise. I asked Eamon to explain that to me.
A social enterprise is a project or an enterprise whose primary purpose is social. So our primary purpose here is to deal with the issue of climate change and the problem with cars that have short range, and that we need to extend their range to help us deal with the climate change project. But we're not a charity, we're not getting money from donations, and we're not getting money from the public. So we can also earn money, we charge for our services, and then as a social enterprise, though, we can't ever sell the social enterprise and make money. It's a social project whose only purpose is social.
And there we conclude this short podcast featuring Barry McMahon and Eamon Stack and their Range Therapy enterprise, aimed at giving new life to older electric cars. It's another example of innovation at a small local level which should be the subject of a much larger conversation. Once again, thanks to Barry and Eamon for taking the time to talk to me, and to the Kildare Public Participation Network for asking me to do this small series. Climate action is not for other people, it's for all of us. It's not for tomorrow, it's for now, so that we have a tomorrow. I'm Brian Byrne. This is Kilcullen Diary. Thanks for listening.